Hi, I'm Feroz Khan, and welcome to Drag and Drop Low Code Unplugged, the podcast where we explore the game changing impact of low code in software development. Join me in insightful conversations with IT leaders and passionate low code enthusiasts who are at the forefront of this digital evolution. Together, we'll explore how early adoption of low code is giving businesses a competitive edge on a global scale. We'll discuss its impact on software development, dissect its role in transforming businesses, and uncover the ways in which it's reshaping career trajectories. So whether you're a seasoned IT professional or a curious enthusiast, be sure to tune in as we share success stories and unravel the mysteries of low code. Subscribe now and stay tuned for a front row seat to the revolution that's shaping the future of technology. So let's go. Hi, Afonso, how are you?
Hello, Feroz. I'm doing great. You?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest on our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. It'd be good to start with, for those who, may not know who you are, it'd be good to a little introduction about who you are, where you're from.
Makes sense. My name is Afonso Carvalho. I'm an OutSystems tech lead and an MVP. I was born and raised in Lisbon, and that's where I'm currently based.
Okay, and have you kind of, you're an MVP, but it'd be good to kind of delve kind of more kind of prior to that, so it'd be good to start with a bit about, where your career started, where your kind of interest in IT started, a bit from kind of the beginning.
Yeah, we can take a couple of steps back.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I remember the first time I was introduced to a computer. I was 12, I think. They were pretty rare in Portugal. This
Yeah,
was this was the 90s. This wasn't exactly a rich neighborhood. It was a
yeah.
cousin of mine. His father got a computer. He invited me over. He showed it to me. I remember that he had internet, and the people in the apartment building would line up because it wasn't a very common thing. So people would just line up at his door after dinner so they could use his connection and his computer to check things out, to read. It was a very interesting time. That was my first time seeing a computer, and it kind of fascinated me since that age. I stuck to computer science since that day. It took me a little while to get a computer myself. I
Mm.
think only after 5 or 6 years after that could I really have my first computer, so I could start messing around with a little bit of code, with a little bit of user experience myself.
And when you kind of started playing around with it, and obviously you studied computer science, while you were studying, was there a certain technology that kind of piqued your interest that you knew this is the direction I'm going to go with once I've graduated?
I was very interested in networking when I
Mm,
started. I thought it was fascinating that you could be in one place, you could be in Lisbon, and you can connect to the other side of the planet. You could meet other cultures, learn other languages. I always thought that was very interesting. It was very different from phones, SMSs, from all the other technology I'd been exposed to at that point. So I think the
mm.
web was definitely the thing that caught my interest at the start.
Yeah. And then when you went into your kind of professional career, what did you start with straight away?
I started with Java, and a funny story, I actually considered quitting IT after that to follow my second passion, animals.
Yeah.
But it was a very difficult experience because the model that we started with wasn't very good to start with. It was the classic bad experience,
Mm,
waterfall, distant remote client that wasn't available, very old practices. I started with Java in 2012, 2013, if I'm not mistaken.
mm,
And just to get an idea of how old this is by IT standards, this was only 3 or 4 years after GitHub started. Git wasn't a
mm.
thing that was used, at least in Portugal, in the company as I was used to working with. We still used Subversion. Everything that was supposed to be simple with IT and coding was a tremendous pain.
Yeah. And you briefly mentioned, you nearly went into your kind of second passion with
Yeah.
animals. So what obviously you didn't do that. So what would that have been if you did go that way?
Um, I always had birds growing up. My grandmother was a huge
Mm,
fan of parrots. She always had at least two.
yeah.
When she found one she liked that she wanted to get, she couldn't take care of too many. They're a very
Mm,
demanding animal and pet. She'd give them to my mother. And so I'd always have a parrot next to me
yeah.
wherever I go. So I've always thought about being a veterinarian. It
Ah,
was
cool.
always my backup choice if
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't work out.
Ah, interesting. Cool. And obviously, yeah, you're not a vet, or we wouldn't be talking.
No,
So can you tell me about, obviously you had this experience with Java and you were kind of like, okay, I'm ready to give this up, So how did you come across OutSystems and how did you hear about it?
a friend of mine from college introduced me to the platform. She actually started working for OutSystems through a partner. And she was talking to me. I remember the day perfectly. I was wrestling with a Java class. I was stuck working with it for 2 hours. And she was talking, hey, you should come check this out. It's low code. You don't have to do a lot of things. So, okay, I'm gonna take 5 minutes to look at this.
Yeah,
And I looked at the website and I perfectly remember thinking, oh no, she's not going to be able to do anything with this.
yeah,
It looks so simple, so basic. It's she's not going to be able to do anything real with this. Uh, at that point, she insisted I kept looking at it. I finally sat
mm,
down, made an app, and I was more persuaded at that point. The Java company I work with folded, and I actually started looking for an OutSystems developer position. I
mhm,
found it in a smaller place, and for the first time, I actually had someone dedicated to teaching me the
mhm.
platform, an actual senior instead of just self-learning.
Yeah,
And that's where I felt that I really grasped the platform and its potential.
yeah. And when you kind of first started, did you get certified before going to look for a job, or did you just start applying for jobs?
I immediately started applying for jobs. I
Okay.
felt that what I didn't know, I would be able to
Mm,
pick up, and I was mostly right. There's
mm,
things that are easier to learn when you
mm,
have someone who's already made those mistakes teaching you,
mhm,
but
mm.
you can still pick a lot of out systems up by just wanting to learn it.
Yeah. And how many years had you been working with Java when at that point when you started your OutSystems journey?
I think it was 1 year of
One
Java.
year. Okay, fine. Because obviously, there's this terms that, obviously there's people, citizen development is a thing that gets thrown around. But, do you feel, obviously they say people who have a traditional background can pick up the platform much faster. Did you feel, even though you had someone there to guide you, did you feel your transition was, there's certain things that, you'd come across where you kind of could easily pick it up and just get going?
I think my transition was simple enough. There's a couple of
Mm,
concepts and specific things that you will still be able to learn, but you're going to have to headbutt against the wall every now and
mm,
again. But that's all learning experiences, in
yeah.
my opinion. I think if you have a background in IT, it helps. But at the same time, I think OutSystems is moving towards a way to democratize software development. You can build something without sitting down and actually finish a degree in IT. And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. And then it's fascinating to hear that obviously, you decided, okay, I'm gonna apply for OutSystems jobs and hopefully I'll get one. Where, in the current day and age, it's not that easy to just say, okay, I'm gonna become an OutSystems developer. I will just apply.
I think having the background in IT helps, but I
Yeah.
think from my experience, a lot of people in business
Mm,
are either very happy with the way they do things, or they're very unhappy and they're desperately looking for ways to improve their workflow, their output, the things that their team produces. And I've seen some people in a more business position sit down next to me and tell me, "Hey, I really want to do this very simple proof of concept. I really want to do this simple case. Can you show me how? Can you give me pointers?" And those people will eventually make something. Now, if they want to do something in Java, we'd be talking months,
mm,
maybe years. of self-learning before they can actually produce something usable. And that time is weeks in OutSystems.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously you've been using the platform for a number of years. So I'll ask you another question later. But in the beginning, when you were learning, what kind of impressed you most about, the platform?
I really liked all the documentation accessible in one place. I couldn't sit down and watch a couple of videos at night and feel like every step of the way I'd be learning something. Java had its own documentation, but it was all very dry. It was all very, here's your API, here's your classes, here's your methods, figure
Mm.
something out. And I was very impressed with OutSystems having its own learning section, very organized to get you up to speed and get you producing something.
Yeah, and do you feel like you said earlier, do you feel because you had the opportunity to learn alongside someone who'd already had that experience and made the mistakes kind of allowed you to ramp up much faster than, doing a training course or, online learning on your own?
No, definitely having a senior next to you is not just to quickly catch up on specific areas you'd make yourself, but it really helps have someone next to you to bounce ideas and to help you guide towards better directions, more productive
Yeah,
uses of your time.
yeah. And now you've used it for several years. So can you kind of, in the time of using the platform, can you tell me, one or two kind of features that have come out in the platform that have really kind of your personal view of, really taken it to the next level?
Um, I think my favorite feature in the entire history of the platform was definitely mobile apps. I think it was the I started working with OutSystems 9, and it was the one need that I felt that was immediately obvious and that I couldn't fulfill with OutSystems. So someone would tell me, hey, this web app is very cool, thank you, but we'd really like it if you could build a mobile app, a
Mobile,
mobile
yeah,
version of this. And we'd have to slow down and say, okay, we can do that, but we're going to have to go native and it's going to
yeah.
take a long time. You're not going to see the quick returns that you're used to.
Mm, mm. And in more recent times, kind of is there anything in the more kind of recent updates that you felt is really you know taking that making the platform kind of an even better option for customers?
Um, I think it all started, there's been several versions of it since,
Mhm,
but I distinctly remember starting with Silk UI. It was maybe 6, 7 years ago. Silk UI was a collection of widgets and essentially quick patterns you could use for your UI
mm,
for your front end. And I remember it thinking this is a huge save of time. I really hope they keep building on it. And they did. They just don't
mhm.
call it Silk UI now. They changed the name a couple of times. I think it was web patterns at some point. Now it still is. And having those sorts of tools to really speed up your work, the simpler things that you have to do by hand have your accelerators right there. That's a huge value as well.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously talk about the positives. Is there anything that you feel the platform doesn't offer that you'd like to see in the near future?
Um, I really hope that eventually we can see the mobile potential expanded. Right now, you can do a lot of things in it. I know that things are being done with Ionic and their
Yeah,
new partnership, but I really hope they can keep developing in that direction. Because right now the engine is Cordova. There's a couple of things that you can do.
mm,
There's a few things that you can't do as easily, but I really hope that they keep working in that direction.
yeah, yeah. And can you talk us through, one or two, projects that you've been involved in that you've been kind of quite proud to be involved in, and some details about it, obviously without mentioning who the
Yeah,
customer was. Yeah,
any
any
names.
customer names, yeah.
I remember my first big project as a tech lead. It was me and two more people, so a three-man team. We had to develop and deliver an application that would manage contracts. So picture this scenario. You work at a supermarket, and a lot of the work there is temporary. So you work small contracts, 1, 2, 3 months. There's very specific legislation. You have to make sure that you renew these contracts at a specific time, and you might have 20 people working at a supermarket. So all this work would be done in an Excel. This person has a 2 month contract. You have to renew it at this date. So we created an application that managed that through SAP and through calendarization. So we'd be able to see how many hours this person works, when that contract starts, when that contract ends, when that contract has to be renewed in because of the existing laws. I remember thinking that this would be a very small scale thing, but it ended up being used across every supermarket of that company in Portugal. And I think it was responsible for managing, I think, the contracts of 1,200 employees at that point. And it took us, I want to say, 5 months to deliver. So I think it was a very good time
Mhm.
for the value that it brought to that company.
Yeah. So it took 5 months with you as a tech lead and two developers to deliver
Yeah,
that. Wow, that's really
exactly.
good. That's really good. And there's this thing about obviously you've kind of just touched on the speed, right? Speed with the platform, and
Yeah,
there's everyone's kind of talking about is it actually that fast? In your experience, do you agree that it does? If because you're someone who's actually worked with traditional development as well, do you feel the difference is quite big with
it is.
traditional
It's
compared
huge.
to low code?
I remember two distinct things. I worked for another customer back in that Java developer position, and we had to deliver a very quick platform to manage deliveries. This was before Uber. This was a
Mhm.
potential competitor that didn't quite pan out.
Yeah.
And I remember that we took 6 months to try and build something in Java. Um, we had to build a backend in a very specific language, Erlang. It was a huge mess. And by the end of it, we had a very simple prototype. It could do some things, but it didn't really finish every use case as we wanted. I remember that a few years after I picked up OutSystems, I tried making the same proof of concept. And it took me 2 months of very part-time work after work hours to deliver the exact same thing that
Wow.
it took us 6 months to attempt in Java.
Yeah. Did
So
you
yeah,
did you did you at any point feel like, oh, I wish I knew about OutSystems a lot earlier in my career?
definitely. It was
Yeah.
just 1 year of Java, and I
Yeah.
really think of how different my path would have been if I had picked it up instead of Java. But it is what it is, and I think that year in Java also taught me a lot of things that I use even now.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add. That obviously, that experience is not lost, right? It's helped you
Yeah,
better your career and obviously better your understanding of the platform.
exactly. It just gets turned around and used for something else.
Yeah, yeah. And you're an OutSystems MVP. Can you, usually, MVPs do certain things in the community to kind of get recognized. Can you kind of talk us through, what's kind of how did you become an MVP?
Back then you asked me what were my things that impressed me the most with the platform. So there was the learning section, the
Mm,
videos, but a thing that also impressed me a lot was the forums.
mhm,
Having this centralized place where people would help each other with their own work questions, just bouncing ideas off each other. A little before the pandemic, I actually started participating a lot more instead of just reading. I
yeah.
felt like I finally had enough experience to give back. So I
Mm,
started answering a lot of questions. I actually remember the first question that I answered in the forums. It was a Japanese developer that wanted help with turning a specific JavaScript component, a calendar, into a multilingual component. So we wanted to figure out how to translate month names and extended days into Japanese. I actually thought this is a very good question.
Yeah.
I actually sat down for an hour after work. I started looking at the JavaScript source code. I found the specific place where he had to change it. And I really remember reading his answer. It really felt like he was very grateful for the help that he received. And from that
Mm,
moment on, I just started answering as many questions as I could to try and give
yeah.
back a little to the community.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, it's that those things that you do, not everyone or not every developer like you had someone to kind of mentor you and train you. Not everybody has that. So the forum allows you to kind of, not even just MVPs from anybody, who's kind of sharing and willing to
Yeah,
help. It can really help you out.
I feel like a lot of the expertise and experience of OutSystems is still concentrated in Portugal, and
Mm,
it's still slowly spreading around. It's a lot better than it was a few years back, but there's still a lot of good talent here in Portugal. And
mm,
the only way it can really connect and expand is through the forums and through these platforms.
yeah, yeah. And you're obviously in Portugal. It's the home of OutSystems, from the time you started to now, because that was 2015, you started with
Yeah,
OutSystems, and
yeah.
I think the community back then to today is much larger, So, how do you feel, like in that kind of process, where do you think, the shift, even with customers, right? There's a lot more larger brands adopting low code out systems. You know, how have you feel that growth has been in Portugal? Because obviously that's where it's kind of started.
Uh, I always felt that OutSystems was viewed. I mean, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I also viewed it with suspicion the first time I
Yeah.
looked at it. But I always felt like it was viewed as a toy, as something that you can use to build very simple applications
Mm.
and nothing else. And I think a lot of big big names, as you mentioned, have shown that that's the wrong concept, a wrong idea. And I remember hanging out with friends after work at maybe the first or second year that I started with OutSystems and telling them, yeah, I work with OutSystems. And everyone would give me the glance, the side eye, because it wasn't
Yeah,
a
yeah,
real
yeah.
language, it wasn't a real tool.
Yeah.
But I feel that that perception has changed a lot in the last few years.
Mm. That leads perfectly into my next question because I was going to ask, obviously, as someone who's got, friends who work in traditional development and a network of people, they're giving you the side eye. Was there any kind of conversation, or, what would you kind of, for those people who kind of still, still today don't believe that low code is, for your kind of large scale projects, what would be, or what was something you would have said to kind of convince them?
Uh, I remember telling I actually almost lost the friendship over that one, but I remember telling one of them that code needs to serve a purpose. Your application, your development needs to deliver something. It doesn't matter who has the most code or who has the biggest number of text lines written. If your code delivers value, it's valuable code. And if you can do that without systems in a fraction of the time, there's just no sense in saying, oh, I'll just do it in .NET, I'll just do it in Java. If you can do it faster in another technology, oh, it's just arrogance to say I'll do it somewhere else just because it makes me feel better that I write more code or that I make bigger files than you.
And what kind of responses would you get?
Some took my advice to heart, some didn't. I feel that IT is very much a field of people who are used to doing things the same way. It's funny because it's a tech field, it's an engineering field, but a lot of people are set in their ways. Coding has always been like this, so there's no better way to do coding, and everything else is just stupid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And do you feel maybe because of especially in Portugal because it's a Portuguese company, the developer community in Portugal is, I was at the conference last year. It's huge, right? So
It's much larger, yeah. It's
yeah,
a much larger community here. And
Yeah.
I feel that it's easier to see the value here because of, again, all the big names
Yeah.
that you mentioned picking it up.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's harder in some countries, but
Mm.
here I think it's an easy prospect.
Yeah, I think even for, even just yeah, like you said, there's obviously traditional people who still not interested, but I think the younger generation, especially coming through with all the programs going on within the community as well, I think they're much more open to just going fresh into low code straight out of university rather than coding straight
Yeah,
away.
it is, but honestly, I think that I think I appreciate OutSystems more after working with Java for a year. I
Mm,
think a lot of people would do well to at least look at other technologies just so they don't follow the dogma, just so
mm.
they don't hear OutSystems is faster, period. I
Yeah,
really hope people pick up other technologies so they can compare and see, yes, OutSystems is faster, is smoother to work with than just believing it.
yeah. Faster and smoother, and would you say also just helps you be a better developer?
Uh, I think so
Mm,
because you pick up on certain habits, but I think you pick up on these sorts of baselines with any technology you're working
mm,
with. Trusting your team, knowing how to store your code, how to use source control, how to talk to business. All of these are things that I think are foundational skills. And if you pick them up with any technology, they'll flow nicely into OutSystems.
yeah, amazing. And just a final question about yourself. You've obviously you're an MVP. You're kind of there's nothing above it, right? So what's your kind of personal aspiration, things you're looking to achieve in the future?
I wanna keep building larger apps. I wanna teach more people OutSystems. I wanna take more juniors in and show them the potential of the platform and see them grow. That's one of
Yeah.
my biggest aspirations.
Yeah, and I think that it's the next. You've already done a lot on the forum, so it's the next step for you to kind of grow that more out and do as much as you can.
Definitely. That's definitely
Uh,
my plan.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. It was really good to talk to you, and
Thank you,
hearing your
Feroz.
story and hearing about your where you could have been potentially if you didn't find out systems, and
Yeah,
but we're here today, which is great.
thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode, which is brought to you by iTrack. We are a leading staffing firm that solely specializes in supplying both contract and permanent low-code professionals to organizations globally. Navigating the niche landscape of the low-code market requires the best talent, and we recognize its critical importance for our clients. Whether you're a company looking to strengthen your team, an individual seeking the next career move, or someone entirely new to the world of low-code, we're here for you. Our extensive experience and in-depth market knowledge enables us to quickly pinpoint the ideal candidates while offering expert advice and support at every stage of your low-code journey. Reach out to us through our website or connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to assist you. Thank you once again for joining us today. We'll be back next week with another insightful episode. Until then, take care.